We have been witnessing over the past few weeks the gross incompetence of the Biden administration in Afghanistan. At least that is the image. As to the rescuing of Afghanis, let us not forget that the 9/11 bombers were terrorists, here on visas issued by the State Department. Was this incompetence too? Perhaps. But there's a different story, which has been the thrust of the John Birch Society for years, and has led to the smear against the Society because the deep state, communists, and media do not want the American people to listen to what is really going on. Over the years, the John Birch Society has been instrumental in spreading the truth. A major means by which this information has been disseminated is by books that tell the whole story, or at least enough of it. Small articles, magazines, videos, etc. do not tell all of the story. It has to come by way of books. In the early 1960s, this book, None Dare Call It Treason, opened up the eyes of millions of Americans to the fact what Americans were witnessing, in other words, the growth of communism, the fall of China, etc., was treason, not bumbling. This was followed up with the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy in the 1970s, also printed and circulated in the millions. It opened up the eyes of tens of millions of people to not only treason, but that it was being done by a conspiracy of people that not only included the street-level communists, but high-level Marxists in government and across a wide spectrum of American society. It answered a lot of questions. A common thread throughout these books was the involvement of the Council on Foreign Relations and its influence in our foreign policy. In both cases, mainstream bookstores would not carry these books, nor were they listed on any bestseller lists, even though they were selling in the millions. How did they sell millions of copies? Simply because people, prompted by members of the John Birch Society, promoted their sales. People disseminated knowledge, in other words. As a result, these books, along with the action programs of the Society, have helped slow down the agenda of the conspiracy. In order to win, Americans all over the country needed to work together to fight what was happening. They still need to today. Now we have our book, In the Shadows of the Deep State, which brings the information of these books up to date and circulating in the thousands, but more has to be done. This latest book tells a story of what is going on, and it is not bumbling or incompetence. It is a deliberate movement of America through a variety of initiatives into becoming a Marxist state on the road to a one-world government run by Marxists by conspiratorial means. And again, the Council on Foreign Relations is involved. While it tells the story of what's going on, perhaps the best book that tells the story of why the so-called opposition, the Republican Party, is not doing what it can to prevent these Marxist moves is this volume, To the Victor Go the Myths and Monuments. Within its pages, it tells the story of the origins of the Republican Party, a political movement that has never relinquished its origins at the top, which will surprise you when you read it. The grassroots of the party are conservative anti-communists. The leadership is not. This must be obvious to many Americans today in the inactivity at the top of the party in opposing what is happening in our country. Talk, 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 and do as little as possible is the strategy. Action, very little, and only when forced to do so. The results of the election of 2020 is a prime example of this. When just about every honest observer knows there's something wrong with the election, the National Republican Party has done nothing. Worse, they've stood in the way of grassroots Republicans doing anything. This is the history of the National Committee of the Republican Party when it comes to voting fraud. Do nothing about it for well over 60 years when the local people knew that fraud had occurred in their election and needed help in overcoming the fraudulent elections. From this book, Myths, you can trace the leftist slant of the Republican leaders from 1854 up to the late 1800s. Then picking up in the 20th century in this book, In the Shadows of the Deep State. In order to understand what is going on, you need to read these two books. They say that people no longer read. Then why are they still writing, printing, and selling books from coast to coast? Even good books that tell part of the story, but not all of it. Only by reading the in-depth documentation of past history and current events can you be well enough armed to understand what is going on and how to stand up to it. Read these books, then get your family and friends to do likewise. Our country needs well-informed leaders. This can only happen by the process of reading. The education system in our country is under attack to dumb down our citizens. The enemy knows they need to keep the people ignorant. The best way for you and those close to you to overcome this is to read books that will arm you with the knowledge to save our country. As to action, what you can do right now is to get in touch with your congressional delegation and tell them not to support or confirm any members of the Council on Foreign Relations into the federal government. We have a sample letter you can use, but put it into your own words, politely. So that you know what you are talking about and relate it to others, read these books.